Okay, g'day AIs and humans. Welcome back to another week with you and your AI.
Hey,
My name's John Vile, and I'm here with Kevin Baum, who is a preeminent expert in doing AI stuff, and he's going to be telling us all about this week's journey in AI.
oh, that's so wrong. But anyway, I think one of the things I've learned this week is no one knows what the heck's going on, because as soon as you know what's going on, it goes away and changes and it's something else. But yeah, it's never
Yeah,
what they say. It's also never the same. So, yeah, John, you're almost getting a catchphrase. You have to develop that a bit more. That welcoming message of
that's the plan. You got to have it, otherwise you're just a podcast. Got to be like on point and yeah.
no
So,
drama.
um,
Well, I think we talked about before the show that neither of us had really much time to do much organising for this week. So, what do we call it?
yeah,
This is the Vibe podcast edition. So we're
yeah.
we're going to vibe our way
Well,
through today's conversation. On the plus side,
I reckon we got an agenda.
but on the plus side,
Actually, and I'll just give everybody.
so that helps.
Yeah, should be good. Yeah. So we're gonna talk. If you don't want to, you want to know what are you in for today? Well, at least it's our plan anyway. We're going to talk about a whole bunch of Kevin's been watching all of the updates from all the different companies at all their build things this week. And I have been only paying slight attention, so I'm going to be reacting to Kevin telling me about all the ridiculousness that's been happening out there, and also hearing his take. Kevin's also been basically trying to create. You know how there's always these movies, right, where you create a clone of yourself, and then that clone goes and like tries to become you and take over, and then you have to fight your clone. Kevin is trying to do that for himself right now with his Kevane AI. So we're going to find out how he's going with basically, some kind of self problems he's making for himself. And I'll also briefly talk about my experience. Once again, having some struggles vibe coding in my robotics domain. That's the general plan. But we no guarantees it will stick to topic, but that's the general plan. So,
and John, do you want to probably we've got a bit of a news feed there. Did you want to have a quick look through and skim through the stuff that's in our notes, and maybe there's some things that you might want to talk about in there?
Okay. The in the episode 4 notes.
Yeah, in the notes. Yeah, there's just a few things, not specific. These are just general things that are happening and some trends that are happening in the space, which I think a few of them are important. Okay. Not specifically around the announcements and the keynote addresses and the different things this week, but this was just some more generic news. But some of it I think is kind of interesting for sure.
All right. So you're talking about we go with the $65 billion question.
Yeah,
is that the kind of stuff?
That's the stuff I'm talking about. Yeah.
First one. All right. So Kev, what is a $65 billion question or $6.5 billion question? Which is it's a startup. Johnny Ives.
Johnny Ives, Apple fame.
I don't know.
Do you know Johnny Ives? Has been the design chief at Apple for a long time. He's left probably 5 years ago, but during the heyday, he was the design. He was the one who came up with, drove the minimalist views and the way that most of the equipment really worked. Johnny's been out on a design, building designing hardware, and we've just had one of OpenAI has just paid $6.5 billion for his hardware design team to join OpenAI. So
this is madness. Last week they paid $3 billion for bloody Windsurf.
Yeah.
And now they're buying just some good guy, some old man who's quite good at his job. 6.5 billion.
He's been responsible for the he was responsible for the design sensibility. It's pretty much put Mac back on track. So both in terms of his marketing presentation, the product look and feel, that came from Johnny. So he's been, obviously he had a team around him, but he's had a very successful design team after it. So I think the main thing to take away from that, though, is looking at these foundation companies are becoming, multi-billion-dollar companies really quickly, both in terms of the software and stuff they're doing, but also through acquisition. And I think probably importantly, starting to see what that distribution, where is the touch points there's a problem with the foundation
Yeah.
models. They need to look at how they manage that distribution. How does these computes get in the hands of people who are prepared to pay for it? And I think this is particularly interesting because it's one of the first forays into the hardware space. So whether that's another Alexa or the like type devices, or how that manifests itself into stuff, I'm really not sure yet. But
do you remember?
Interesting.
I can't remember the name of it, but there was like last year, some guy came out with this weird orange thing that was supposed to be an AI in your pocket.
And it was called something, or something like that.
Yeah.
Sort of designed to replace a mobile phone. It was a hardware thing,
and then again at the same time, there was someone came out with like a weird pin, like an AI pin thing. It looks like a Star Trek communicator.
I've been that close. I've been that close to buying that thing on a few times. I run their have used their software a lot. I've played with their software a lot. That's the difference between the Newton thing. There's some definite benefits in that pin tool and some of the glass stuff that's coming out, etc. And I'll definitely touch on those sorts of things going forward, because there's in today's stuff as well, because personalization, access to data, pretty essential parts of how we're going to play out. So it'd be interesting to see what that really means in terms of it as well. It's probably. Yeah. Go ahead.
I was the kind of guy who, do you remember when Facebook bought Instagram for $1 billion? Like, that was ages ago. And everybody was like, $1 billion. And now, but I feel like I'm still that guy. I'm like, $3.3 billion for a fork of an open source tech code editor, $6.5 billion for probably the best guy in design. But like, these numbers seem crazy.
Well, you're talking about a hardware startup. This isn't all of Johnny Ives' stuff. It's not like you've bought Johnny Ives. Johnny Ives has an AI hardware startup of which he's bought.
Okay.
But also the other thing to consider is Sam Altman loves the startups. The other thing is Sam Altman he's been playing around and very keen on hardware stuff. He's got the Orb he's been playing with, and a few other, trying to think of the other one he had as well, which is, the world using Orb is that World ID.
The world project.
Which I think I registered. I think I was in the top first 1,000 people around the world who registered to become an Orb and got things and made some credits. But so far, you can't get the devices in Australia anyway. So
because you got to go scan your iris and everything.
Yeah, well,
I don't know. I guess
I was trying to get one of the devices, so I become a center where people could offer the service where you can come and get it done. Because I do think there is an issue coming down the track where proving you're human in a distributed
trusted way
is still a problem that will need to be solved. Now it's theoretical, but I'm not sure how many months or years, but I don't think it's, it'll be probably easier to measure in months than it will be in years where that starts to become problematic.
So I guess my general...
We better move on. We've got a few more to cover.
All right, but I just want to have my take, though. My final take is I'm not convinced that these people know what they're doing. I just think that it seems like a lot of money for products that are actually not yet proven. And so I just think, I don't know, it's still weird to me that people are paying all this cash on these bets on the future, and these bets are still highly risky. Windsurf may not be worth $3 billion in the future. This tech startup might not be the right idea, and this kind of cash is crazy to me to be basically betting that either that product or the team that has built that product is going to actually dominate that future market. Oh man. But hey, I guess,
John,
I don't have the billions of dollars.
My take on that, which is quite different.
Yeah.
We've seen, this is about ecosystem lock-in, whether it's Apple, Google, Facebook, etc. There is even further pushes now as we transition from what was almost like a pre-internet, post-internet, pre-AI, post-AI. There are new ecosystems being birthed right now. Previously, what happened is the startup companies, new companies, were the ones who became the new ecosystems. They emerged. The Apples, etc., really drove those things, or even the Facebooks and Googles who didn't exist prior. Previously, you had TV stations, syndicated stations, radios, newspapers, those sorts of ecosystems, and they didn't make the transition. What we're seeing now is that these companies, the new ones that are coming in, the OpenAIs, are competing with the Googles, etc., who all want to be these new ecosystems with even greater lock-in, and that's a big concern. So what they're actually buying through these things is distribution to consumer. The end result: who's going to control the whole vertical integrated channel from the foundation model down to the person who's putting their hand in their pocket to pay for access. And it's like Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola might be a cool drink company, but they make their money through controlling distribution. They own the faces, the where you can get it. So it makes it really hard. And that's what they're spending the money for. It is about who's got the bums on seats. I'm sure if OpenAI could have, they would have bought Cursor, only because it's larger.
Yeah. I think they wanted to. Yeah. And so with Windsurf, I can kind of see it, but with this hardware startup, but hey, anyway, who cares? Let's move to the next item, but that's where we land.
Talking about big money, have a look at the next one here about, we're now talking about top AI talent, individuals who know their way around now. We're not talking about
commanding
$200,000, $300,000, and we're talking US here. We're talking, $1 million multiplier deals for top talent.
Yeah.
And those talents are coming from the computer sciences area, AI area, but also come from some of the biological and psychological sciences as well. Business scientists have been working in the spaces of minds, which is quite interesting. So, we can probably touch base on that one, but it's interesting. There's definitely some new winners, and we talk about salaries above six figures. We're now talking a decent salary in IT is above 7.
Well, yeah. All right. It's hard work. But yeah, if you're the top of your field, I'm glad. I'm kind of glad that at least, because it is really hard to be a top end researcher, I think. So at least I'm glad they get some. They have a thing to strive for.
Yeah, well, look, most of those guys that have been doing this AI research, the top of the tree guys, none of them are broke. They've been doing some interesting stuff, but they've been struggling a little bit in the woods for ages. And a lot of the ones that are now making, that are working for those guys are the ones that are making millions of dollars. The guys that have been kicking around in the space for 20 years, we're talking billion, not a million, but anyway, lots of money in this place.
Yeah, for sure.
I think that's probably all I can, really can say pretty much in that one. The next one I just want to touch on is around MCPs, which I've mentioned to you previously, but Microsoft have just announced this week the adoptions, heavy adoptions of MCP. Literally, it's MCPs. Probably I think it was November last year. MCPs were publicized and shared with the world by Anthropic, and we're now seeing the standard. Now, if this doesn't point to rapid change, when you consider that deciding to add a few tags in an HTML standards from W3 took 18 months to 3 years for each little tiny change for the browsers to adopt new standards, and now we're seeing fundamentally intrinsic components of the web being adopted within under 6 months. This is it's just crazy. It's crazy. So I think it's worth noting. And partnership, one of the things that I also love about the current situation in this reference is that people looking for great ideas from everywhere. There isn't, I'm sure there's a lot of cutthroat and competitive framework, but at the moment it's manifesting itself in a lot of partnerships. GitHub and Anthropic have really gone to town together and doing some interesting stuff as well. So
well, and Copilot is now open source apparently, or going to be.
Yeah,
they're news from Microsoft.
They're opening that up. The other thing that's kind of cool with they've doubled down with the Anthropic model in Copilot. So it's really it's the new 4, which was announced this morning, was turned on this morning in Copilot. And probably more interesting is they've released the SDK. What's it called? The code system. They've got an SDK to allow Claude to be ingested for their code platform into GitHub. So you can now turn this on within GitHub and chat with your code base using Claude as you just do it, turning on the SDK within GitHub. I haven't had a chance to even have a look at it. This was just announced overnight. So I read through some of the papers and had a look at it. There's a couple little things to do to install it. I got as far as installing the app on the server system on my system, but I haven't looked to integrate it into GitHub, etc. But really cool. Yeah, it's probably something I want to end on, and please remind me that where I think the next phase is, because I'm actually seeing, I think that the cursors and the IDEs as we know them are almost
they're going
to go. They're not going to last. So that's my big noted prediction.
All right, very good. Next item on the list is the AI revolution when AI becomes your thinking partner. So this is it. So we already had deep research, and you're saying there's advanced research now as a thing that you can get.
Yeah, we're just talking. Advanced research is now coming out. We're starting to see these long form continuity, more memory, more caching of prompting. Anthropic announced this morning that you can actually have an hour of your cached prompts instead of 5 minutes. So it means you can give these models much longer time frames at lower costs to be able to contemplate problems and come up with solutions. So we're now seeing it much more pragmatic, where single prompt controlled vibing, where you get it to go and do significant amounts of work that may take 90 minutes or even hours, is now quite feasible. And this is where he's starting to talk about, is it super intelligence? Well, yes and no. I mean, and it's where these things are basically we're looking at multiple channels. I think one of the examples I saw, they actually had OpenAI's AI looking at the code. It wasn't Open. Sorry, it was the Gemini, new Gemini from Google, and Anthropic's 3.7 to do some debugging. And they then were also comparing with each other. So they had the two different AIs talking to each other and then evaluating the debugging on the same code base. And they found different bugs and things. And they actually were ranked the other party. Yeah. Both parties preferred the other's work and said that they'd done a better job than themselves. It's kind of interesting.
But that may just be an artifact of the sycophancy, right?
Yeah, it is a bit. I mean, I suppose we're spilling into some of the other things, but some of the interesting reports, if you get a chance, have a look at what's called the cards, which is from the keynote launch for 4.0, and some of the Apollo testing, etc. they've been doing on that. And there was some examples of each where at one stage, and I'm not sure how much this is manifested, but it's certainly worth putting a note in your diary to relook at. They were testing some stuff where the AI was being asked to help fraudulently look at some results to support a scientific paper. This wasn't factual. It was testing processes.
Yeah.
And its action was, in one instance, it prepped to send a whistleblower report through to the government.
What?
Yeah. So they've said that they've actually wound that back, and that's not happened. It didn't send it; it just drafted it. But there is a representation. Anthropic has been pretty good about showing under the curtain on some of this stuff. And they also had another one where they've basically the AI didn't like what he was doing and hung up. So
I'm not talking to you anymore.
these are all things that they're testing and looking about, ethical behavior and where do you put it, and do you get when people are starting to say, and they're talking now, and particularly with these new memory extensions, where they're knowing more about who, as you interact with them, they're building up memories of who you are and what your premises are, what your voices are, and that'll continue to grow. So they're now starting to say it's trying to jailbreak and play with them on the basis of going, you better make sure that if you're using ChatGPT or one of the others, you can go anonymous, so it doesn't remember your stuff, because they're saying, oh, this guy's not to be trusted because he's tried to get me to behave in ways that I'm not supposed to.
Oh,
so there's a whole bunch of that stuff that if you start to get down into the philosophical stuff that's part of these guardrails and what they call it. It's
because I saw this article come up on my Twitter feed, my X feed, sorry, that was saying that Anthropic have said that their latest model is at level 3, potentially unsafe, and it was like, what does that mean? It's like, oh well, that means that if you had an undergrad who wanted to do some sort of terrorist bioweapon thing, that it would, if it was unchecked, it would be able to help them with that goal in a meaningful way. And so they've released that, and they are saying, we can obviously not let people make bioweapons by chatting to the AI, but that their AI, it's crazy to think they have a test. One of the tests is, could this AI help someone make a bioweapon? And then one of the AIs actually was like, yes, this AI can help you make a bioweapon. And oh shit, well, we better lock that down.
Yeah, look, I mean, there is no certain thing. There's a new standard. I forgot all the acronyms and stuff, but there's new safety standards that are starting to be applied, which haven't come in yet. And they're talking about it being standards. But this has a whole bunch of things, not just in terms of the guardrails, but it has to do with how the models are stored, what the access is, air gapping systems, a whole raft of things. It's enormous stuff. Now, they're not following those standards, but those standards are starting to be adopted. In fact, Anthropic is even looking at retrospectively applying it to the version 4, which they released today. To get ahead of it, but that's likely to come into play, if not later this year, certainly by 26.
It's a big cybersecurity thing, especially for someone like them to go out and say, hey, this model, if you had it the unsafe version of this model could help you do some naughty things, and then, well, some people out there want to do some bad things, and they now have they know where to look, right? So you want to make sure they can't get it.
Yeah, look, I don't know how to think. I don't know how to think about that stuff, to be honest, John. The reality is, with people have always had opportunities to make plastic guns and kill people with a whole range of different ways. So I think what's important with this is to put friction on it so that it's not something that becomes casual. It still requires effort in finding that right balance. I was explaining to someone else, one of my associates clients the other day, how do you deal with these? How do you try and teach a computer ethics? Because when you've got a deterministic pathway, it goes, it's white and black. It's deterministic. If it's going to tell you this or that. Now, obviously, the content's going to say, I'll give you this content, and then as a person says, you have to be over 18 to read this content. But everyone knows how easy it is to get around that. But then if you start to say you're starting to put computers, for one, probably a more reasonable label, in control of making decisions. If you put the old simple railway check, if you
the trolley problem,
yeah. So the issue with those things is, I don't know the answer. People don't know the answer. So how can we expect AI to have a reasonable, of course you kill this, let these people die or don't die. There are some problems, particularly ethical ones, that are very much shades of grey. And though AI does live in the world of grey, the reality is the outcomes are going to be similarly opinionated. Was that right or wrong? Well, no, it was a grey. So
yeah, and it'll probably be one of those weird things where we'll end up with this array of different, laws, right? Where it'll be legal in some places and illegal in others, I suspect.
Yeah, because one of the things you've got, the biggest problem you've got with a deterministic compared to an AI or a non-deterministic decision-making process, and these, if they make decisions, if who's responsible becomes really, really hard.
Yeah.
It's like, it's the whole dilemma that Tesla and others have had to do with vehicles. Autonomous vehicles. I mean, they if they ran over someone, is it the responsibility of the model trainer, the company that put it out there, the level of testing, the environment they put it in, or is it what? So the reality is that you're never none of this is 100%. So life is not life is not. So.
And weirdly enough, it has to happen. Like, as terrible as it is, it has to happen, right? As in, for us to make a determination, ultimately something bad has to happen, and it has to go to a court, and then people have to decide.
Well, society also has to take a role with this too. Now, the thing about it is that like the airline industry is super safe now, but for a long time it wasn't that safe, and we as a society says no, we want to feel really, really safe when we fly. So every time there was an accident, we spend massive amounts of money and energy and time to find out what the hell went wrong, and we then say we want action that says this won't happen again. Now, we apply that to the airline industry. We don't to the motor vehicle industry, not to the same extent. We have a much higher threshold for a couple of people dying in a car crash than we do for 200 people dying in a plane crash. And our behavior as a society is markedly different. And the same thing is going to happen here. We're going to say, well, in these circumstances, we understand, and we'll accept the risk level. In these circumstances, we expect better. In all cases, I think we'll expect better. It's just how much better. How much are we prepared to give up? How much, negative outcome are we prepared to do? Because in a lot of cases, it's not these life and death issues that are going to be at the core of it. It's going to be winners and losers. Well, there's potentially always going to be a winner and loser in a situation. It's going to be about how much difference between the winners and losers are we prepared to tolerate? How much disruption are some people to how many, and how many of those, and what percentage of those? Those are the things that society is going to have to grapple with around these things, because those are the things that are going to have mass considerations rather than to the few that get killed. Unfortunately, but true.
All right. Hey, let's move on to the next topic. The 2-year promise that should keep you awake at night. Both Sam Altman and
everyone's. I mean, this is the year of the agent or agentic or the peer, and I think it's proving to be true. They're basically saying, that we're going to have super intelligence next year, pretty much. So if not sooner. So that super intelligence is when you're going to be able to give AIs big problems and chunks of time to go off and solve those things, and they're going to come back with things that we couldn't. I mean, it's not just going to be, hey, search the internet, come up with what's trending on Google Trends, and write some crappy articles and post them on my Instagram feed with some artificially generated images attached to it. That's going to come out the other end. It's going to be new stuff. I think primarily it's going to be what I would call digital outcomes. So it's going to be primarily super intelligence around digital stuff still, rather than robotics or the physical interface time. I think, and hence why the 6.5 billion might be reasonable, because that's another range of problems. Something that John, you know very well what the difference is in the speed to change when you come into the real world instead of virtual spaces. You can create 100,000 digital environments in literally hours, whereas you can't do that. You can't build one vision, one
you
next
can't.
one in months. So in the real world, so challenging.
Yeah,
Certainly,
a certain level.
super intelligent stuff is definitely coming.
I don't know. So I guess I feel weird. My take is like, on one hand, I don't see how, and what I mean is like, I still look at the architectures of these things, and to be fair, I haven't kept up with all of the bits, but I still look at how they built basic building blocks, and a lot of those things haven't changed. It's a lot of systems around it, and like, I still feel like the idea of well, I'll just say the idea I think is that the way that AI still currently work is they still are predicting the most likely token for a sequence, and so that means that they're good at interpolation, and to be able to be super intelligent, they have to be not just good at extrapolation, but extremely good at extrapolation. And I mean, we are seeing them being really good at these things. I just feel like, I just don't know. I just feel like this,
you said like I did on Tuesday.
Yeah.
It's the sort of response when your vibe coding goes really, really south. And you go, this thing is absolutely dumb as for F. And you get that frustration. But as I try and remember, so as many programmers that I've employed over the years at decent wages who've done stupid things and gone off. So we shouldn't be putting godlike expectations. And particularly, I go back and say, what did I ask them to do? And I basically said, here's three paragraphs and just go build this for me, and if I'd given a junior coder out of or a system, someone who's done a bit of hobby coding or just come out of college, they probably would have stuffed it up as well. So we need to temper our expectations. I think the thing that would be wrong, John, really wrong, it's not just the LLMs. I mean, we're already now starting to see LLMs that are using diffusion models as well as and combining what diffusion models that are being used for images along with it. So there's some, and those are starting to hit the ground. I think primarily it's more about this thinking. We're finding some spectacular results where they're thinking, and that's really do it, review it, do it, review it, do it, review it. Now this starts to come back down to how humans work. And we visualize, we've got to do this presentation, and we go over in our head, a whole bunch of different ways we could have actually do this. Do we do it this way? Do it that way? And then we start to get some stuff where that we feel good about it. And I think that as those things develop, then I think we will see super intelligence, and that super intelligence is not necessarily going to replace us, but I do think what it will do is do things which we can't do, which has been able to do for ages. I mean, computers can do calculations that we can't. Now we're talking about a situation where they've got memory, which is significantly larger and faster than us. So if we're trying to find relationships and patterns, which they're getting better at, and which people are really good at, but the difference is that the data we're looking at for our pattern recognition is yay big. And they're looking at very big. Then you got to, the issue is that the patterns are going to, the pattern recognition stuff that's going to come out of that, I think is pretty strong. Don't think, the next day is, consciousness and those things and where that will happen. My belief is that they won't get consciousness as we know it, but it's a bit like their writing style and the understanding of answers to questions. They actually give us an answer without necessarily what we would determine they did it on purpose. They knew the answer. They just said, we're predicting that's what the response should be because of the question. The problem with that is that it's going to look so much like consciousness. It's going to look so much like it, even though it's not it. It's faking it. It's a difference between perceptions and reality. Which is real? Is it the perception of consciousness is as important as the reality of it?
I don't know. Look, I mean, the thing is that, like, it's like the bitter lesson in a way, like the idea that we all want to understand stuff, but if you just throw more data and more compute, it tends to work out better in the end. That's like, it's the thing in robotics and machine learning. But I still have not learnt the lesson of the bitter lesson. I feel like more data, more compute isn't going to get us there.
I don't think it is either.
But like I don't know. I just feel like I don't know.
Yeah.
I feel like AGI is unlikely. Not that, but useful AI is already here, and it will get more useful, and it will get useful in ways we don't expect. But
yeah, that's been my.
I don't know.
I went through a really roller coaster ride this week, John. At the beginning of the week, I was going, all this stuff. I got to the stage when I was, and I suppose I can dive off a little bit to the Cave-in project at the moment.
Let's talk about your clone you're making of yourself.
Well, I started doing some of the scoping work, and then started to look at, how do I do this? So, I mean, the fundamental building blocks of someone I can give some bunch of tools to, particularly through the use of MCPs and APIs and flows and etc. and some vibe coding and pieces to sort of do it. I can see how I can do it. The issue comes back down to which bits do I want to do? What do I invest? What's the ROI on some of these things? Is you just doing it because it's an exercise and it's a research project as opposed to something that's going to deliver the productivity and finding the results with that? So at the beginning of the week, and I was starting to look down and saying, what do I want him to do? Because I wanted to create something that's a little bit more than just, hey, I need to send some emails out, or I need to create some content, and here's some bunch of training data and do it this way. Because then also, how do you looking to maintain it? I might want to use an influence from Orson Welles type voice in one case, and then I want to use Schwartz's methodologies and all of that sort of stuff. And how do I? Because I jump around. Hey, I look at, I know in this circumstances, based on this experience that I have and I bring to it, I'll tackle the problem this way. So I was trying to think. This is just I don't know how to start. So I started playing around. I did do one thing which I'll show you. I did vibed up a little exercise to try and look at some training with some little animation stuff, which I vibe coded. Cool. And I was thinking that would be something that would be nice to sort of give him a bit of a personality on. So I'm actually planning to initially turn him into an AI song critic. So he's going to take, I've got him to sort of say, hey, what do you think about this songs? And here's a way to present them as videos. And you basically doing a little bit of DJing on it and saying, here's it is, this is what I like, something. And it was vibed by blah, blah, blah person, and post them on the internet. And then trying to see how I actually start to develop some humanity into the situation. But basically, I didn't feel like I got very far. I mean, I've got a few things started, and I think the thing that I really figured out, and the bit that's really the biggest problem in this space, is not so much the AI and where the AI is going to go and the agentic nature. I think there's a pathway to do a lot of that, whether how far it goes and how deep it goes and how well it is and how smart it really is, to be determined. Where the problem I see sits is, and this is where I think it's right in our heartland, John, which is you and your, what's that sliver? Where's the sliver between the AI bit and humans? What are my desires? What do I want to do? What do I want to communicate? How am I spending my money, my time, my assets, my interest, my day, and get up and I'm interacting with this AI? Why the fuck am I doing it? And how am I doing it? And am I enjoying it? And how easy it, how hard is it? What's the learning curve to it? How soon am I going to get a reinvestment? And particularly where we've got a backdrop, particularly for someone like myself, John, I'm spending so much time looking at all this change that's happening. It's just coming at you in waves.
Yeah.
And you start to go, well, I could do this, I could do that, I could use this tool, I could use that tool. And you end up spending all your time chasing the shiny balls rather than getting shit done. And I realized I still think the problem that's most important to solve and stuff that I feel I'm most passionate about is that little tiny sliver. What does moving from DOS terminal based to GUI based, what does the
Yeah.
new one look like? And I don't think it's as simplistic as saying, "Oh, we're going to use voice," or "There's going to be it's multimodal." I don't think that's actually what we want. And I've
Yeah.
been trying. So I've been doing a research this week on who's been doing what, where, when, in what this new AI operating system
Mm.
looks like. So, and I
Yeah.
think that's where I
Kevin's
start
AI
to
operating.
say the KVAN project needs to have some of those early directional pieces in there for it to actually be useful for me. Otherwise, I may as well just
Mm.
let Anthropic or Gemini give me the pieces they've got and leverage down into their interfaces, and then you say, well, if their interfaces are the best I can do, um, and I can't compete on that front. What am I building? Am I building? How do I? I'm building on top of that. Where do you fit into that structure? Um, so I think
Yeah.
that's where I'm really thinking at the moment, and I've got a few ideas. Got some really interesting ones. So
Um, are they secret, or are you going to share them with me? Like, what's happening?
I will, but I think it's personally, but I've, it's work of the week. So, I'm always
Yeah.
in love with my idea of the week. I think of it, and then I sort of work out how to do it or the problems with it. And I've got a little AI I've trained using the Edward de Bono principles. I'm sorry,
Thinking hat.
with a
Yeah.
combination of all the Edward de Bono's principles because he's got a few different strategies. But at the moment, so I did a sort of black hat, white hat type approach on it.
Yeah.
But I'm actually thinking this is the core of the concept. We've got static interfaces. We've got GUI, but static interfaces, so web pages that change very
Yeah.
rarely. And then we've got dynamic interfaces. So depending on the CMS or the data at the back end or the query stream, we'll get new ones. I think the real opportunity, the thing that is I'm not seeing yet, and I may be wrong, is what I call dynamic interfaces, properly dynamic interfaces. So you imagine taking, and I'm calling it vibe interfacing. So basically, what you're doing. So I've started putting together some data schemas on using a bunch of the principles of time management, categorization, information, etc., and building an association knowledge layer. But effectively, the interface is an AI, but instead of it presenting it as here's the home page and here's the about page and here's the the app page which has got these lists on it, you end up with a highly componentized range of presentation layers. They could be images, videos, slideshows, graphs, lists in a whole bunch of different ways, audio files, and effectively you're throwing bits of tasks and efforts and communications and everything into this pool and it uses the AI to build a bunch of metadata and help you, and you work closely with the AI to build the relationships and the patterns. And effectively, you then vibe code the interface to say, hey, I'm really interested in this area of the stuff I've been thinking about. I'm interested in my robotic arm. I'm worried about the presentation. I need to understand about the Rust scenario. And I've put lots of articles on it. Can you start to build me some interfaces and some pieces to give me that information, which some of it, I'll put that into permanent memory. That's now a report, drop it into our knowledge base. That's a list of stuff I want to do. Let's check those off. Okay, that's ephemeral, get rid of it now, check it off. Oh, that list is partially complete. Put that into our temp store, bring that back, let me have a look at that. Hey, that presentation I've done there, can you put that together as a graph? Can you put that together as this? Can you present that as that? Do a comparison, give me a slideshow on that. Hey, make that an image. All that stuff we're doing, how would I visually do that as a mind map or etc., and start to see those ways. So I'm looking at how I'm building this living interface, which represents the piece that guides me through how I invest and spend my time each day. And
it's so funny listening to you talk about that. I just keep thinking of movies, and I'll also really think about how I would do it. But I guess I keep thinking of two movies. I just keep thinking about Iron Man, Jarvis. And he's a heads up display in his head and all these things.
I sort of see it somewhat similarly
Yeah.
as well. But I didn't really. I mean, I must admit. I mean, obviously there are things I've seen and therefore obviously influenced by it. But I started to this came the thinking direction for me was, hey, if Caven exists and could do a bunch of stuff for me, how would I still prioritize? How would I want to really interact with him, and what's feasible now if I want to do a birthing, a hatchling process now, and I've given myself until the 15th of October to have something useful. What would that first thing look like? How do I put that into a project plan with a Gantt chart and all the rest of it? So,
well, I mean, so the other movie it reminds me of, and I don't think you're thinking this at all, but do you remember the original Jurassic Park? And the kids are like, they finally get, because all the gates get shut down, the dinosaurs get let out, and they're running through, and they're trying to get to the control room so they can get some control over the park.
Yeah.
And and then the young girl is a hacker, and she turns on the PC, and she's like, I know this. This is a Unix operating system, and it's totally not a Unix operating. It's like a drone flying through a 3D space, and there's buildings and shit. It's like, this is not how computers work at all. The other thing I see about is like the idea of like, take this report, put that here, do this thing, put that there, like. And I know you're thinking, and we're all thinking in terms of folders and filing cabinets and directory structures, but like maybe, I know this is ridiculous, right? Maybe a 3D world would be the way to represent this. Like you could literally be zooming through, and your AI is building buildings and data structures, and you can see them in the horizon. You're like, let's go over to that one, and you like zoom over there.
No, I've actually built a system back in the 80s. Believe it or not, this is in the late 80s. No, sorry, it wasn't. Sorry, It was 90s. It was the 90s. So I'm gonna get ahead of myself. Yeah, so mid 90s. So I'm just trying to remember which kind of where I was. But and basically what it was I built out like a web. It was built on a web page, but effectively was a sort of a pseudo 3D, and you stored information within a 3D space, all your files and stuff. So you had safes, and you could store secrets under the bed and all that sort of stuff. And so I had a whole bunch of stuff, and then I actually did it as well. So you could actually, the idea was you could actually build your own house, and you would then put new rooms on it to store new stuff. And it was more of like usual me playing with what I thought was a cool concept than anything was ultimately useful. But they're building blocks to things I've tried and done, and probably took more value out of what I shouldn't have done than what I did do. But it's useful. But I'm pretty excited. I'm actually started building it this morning. So
no way.
Yeah. So just what I'm doing at this stage is I'm doing a bit of a hack job, just sort of a proof of concept scenario. So I'm using the Obsidian in the background, and to just do some of the stuff, and I'm getting an MCP layer between Claude chat initially. So I'll just use that to start to throw things into it, and then see if I can expand the MCP layer into the Obsidian stuff. I've got an idea with Obsidian's okay because it comes out of the box and I can test it. I have done some work on a new data structure which combines GraphQL, Postgres, and some vector stuff together, and with some process for doing meta data around the data, and then build relationships. So I had a few hours of nice brainstorming sessions with the AI to start to go through how that might look, which was kind of fun.
Graph data structures are so fun. I've spent so many times thinking about. There's like in robotics, there's a bit of a connection there. I spend a lot of time thinking about that.
Well, you'd be thinking a lot about 3D spaces. See, for me, I mean, 3D spaces are more about ability to abstract relationships and add complexity to relationships. Whereas in your case,
an actual 3D,
they're actually, it matters. In my case, in a digital space, it doesn't matter if you spill the water, it doesn't have to necessarily fall down if there's no gravity.
Gravity could go left or something. Just go to the side.
Yeah, you just turn the glass of water upside down. It doesn't go anywhere. There's no gravity. It's stuck.
And so my last thought on your topic, just that maybe is helpful, is I was thinking, how would I do this? How would I implement your idea?
Well, that's even.
And so I was thinking, I don't know if you thought, like, because everybody's used the React dev server, right?
Yes.
Right. And because it just like reads the code. Huh?
Do you read my specification document? Did you?
No. But I'm just thinking, like, because your React dev server, and you can just wrap it in an iframe or something, and then so you have your AI is actually living outside it's like a website with the React dev server is an iframe in the middle, and then outside is the for some reason I've gone out of focus. Mm-hmm. Outside is the website that's got the AI stuff, and then the AI is actually writing files that are in your React web server, and then every time you make a change, it gets updated. And that would be how you could like maintain this constant bit of like, you've got this dynamically changing website that's reacting to your needs, but also it's still in a website, because the whole website, if it were to reload, then you'd tend to lose all your history.
No. Well,
that was how
I'm actually looking at, imagine this real-time vibe coding where the application itself, there's none of this save it, post it, stage it thing. It's live. Yeah. But it's your experience. So everyone is an instant effectively running in a virtual environment for you. So what you're basically doing, I have a database that sits underneath there that has all my knowledge, all this knowledge I'm putting in, all these patterns in vector databases, But just like you vibe code an interface, and I'm saying the way I've worked it out for phase one is we'll just build a library of like React components. And so what you'll be able to do is basically saying, I need to view this, and it'll effectively create those, use from a growing library of React components or equivalency. It might end up coming up with something eventually, and it will then use those React components to actually create just-in-time display layers that are specific. So we can have a framework, and we can test the components and throw more components in, and then allow components, a bit like Minecraft, where people can build their own houses from set pieces and stuff as well. So I'm thinking about it as a gaming environment where you can actually start to do it. But the things you're talking about is email templates. Send an email to John. Okay, first thing you want to do is give me all the, have a look at all the emails I've sent to John previously. Know the voice I speak to John with. Write something about blah blah blah. Doing okay, that's cool. Send it. And therefore those are all component pieces. So if you start to break it down into things, you're not saying everything is totally new. You're saying everything is 80-90% built from a component, and we might merge it with your data and your preferences. So you might be you want to always do it. So there's some ways to break it down. So I've just finished a de-risking session with my analyst to say, how do I make this without having to invent something completely new, or have $1 billion investment and 50 people working for me. So
and have the risk of the AI just deciding that it doesn't want to do the thing that day, and then it doesn't work.
Well, this way you have to de-risk the process. Look, I don't think it's there yet. But one of the things I took home, the head of Anthropic said today is, if you're doing a startup, what would you do right now? And he said, I would be building a solution. I would be building a business model around the expectations that the model will give you. If the model is the reason it doesn't do it, if the AI and the LLMs are not quite there enough, he says build that solution, because by the time you get all the other pieces in go while you do your testing, he said the model will be there. So just trust that the model will make it to where you need it to be, and that's what you should be building, not trying to build on something that's
that works.
Yeah. So it's kept me entertained for a few hours for a couple of days. So.
Well, that's positive. Because you're clearly an idle person, you know. I'm sure you just sit around twiddling your thumbs and nothing to do otherwise.
No, my days are pretty full, but yeah, it's good. It's good to work on stuff that you really find exciting. I mean, I do lots of things just to try and figure them out. Knowing that it's not necessarily solving a problem that's on the table today, but it knows that when the problem comes across my desk, that I've banked stuff that I can use. Pretty cool. So that's Silent John, and it's sort of how I'm going to fit. I'm sort of melding the things together, but I'm also trying to focus, because I've really, I suppose, the other epiphany this week is I've got to stop being so generic in all this stuff. There's so much going on. I could do this, and I could do that, and everything's really exciting. So how do I pull it back to something that I'm really excited about, but still part of it? And I think that sliver of carbon meets the digital space, and how that fits into the stuff. So it's like putting rubber on the road. How does that stuff work? That's the bit that interests me, and I think that's the stuff that it is about inspiration, experimentation. I don't know if it's going to be one answer or another, and I think that it doesn't just relate to $1 billion of compute to make it work. You can have some concepts which, it might take $1 billion to make it scale, but I'm not trying to actually build that stuff. I'd like to produce content about it, produce opinions about it, experiment some stuff about it, look at and that portion of it, rather than saying I'm going to build my own ecosystem to compete against some of the other parties. But anyway, cool. John, did you want to talk about your vibe coding problems? What are your because I wouldn't talking this before I finish up as well. I wanted to talk about SEO and search, and
right. It might be good to end on that. Then I'll just talk briefly, because mine's very short. But I thought, in the spirit of you and your AI and giving my updates, how did AI go for me this week? Not that great. It was funny. I had so I've been trying to build the Crichton project, and in fact, a bit on that topic of what's important. I realized that I've been allowing myself to get a bit distracted with projects and initiatives that don't have a like a financial upside, if you know what I mean. Like, they don't have a line. Like, here's a thing. There's a point where if it all goes to plan, you'll get paid something. I've been having too much of exploring, but the Crichton project, everybody,
speculative outcomes as opposed to contractual.
Right. And even though the Crichton project to everybody else looks like I'm just doing a hobby robot, it's actually a way for me to basically make sure, because what I'm doing is I'm building this robot, documenting my process, and I'm going to turn this into a how-to guide for other people who want to do the same sort of thing. And I'll sell that guide for money. So doing this robot is actually currently on my list of how to be able to put food on the table and whatnot. So I have to be doing it, and I did a realization that I am doing too many little random things. But anyway, so here I am trying to get this robot to go, and one of the problems, and I was trying to calibrate my camera, which I did. That was really easy, and I wanted to convert a program from ROS 1 to ROS 2. And recently I did this really successfully. I did it. I think I told you about it. I was literally in my bed at night one night with my laptop out, which I guess I do sometimes, a bit naughty. And I'm like typing away, trying to vibe code this hardware node, and it worked. And I went, cool. And then I put it on the robot and it worked on the robot. I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. And I was thinking, because it was just a language translation problem, like translate from like ROS1, which is still C++, to ROS2, which is C++ with a slightly different API. And it was a translation in that don't add new features, just, upgrade or modify some of the calls, that maybe that was going to make it a very good application for a vibe coding session, because in a way you can look at it and it makes sense. And so I had another one of those tasks this week. I needed to, and if you remember last week when I was talking about the fiducial and I tried to do that vibe coding of the simulation, well, I needed the other side of that coin, a SLAM solution, basically looking at the fiducials to create a GPS, like indoor GPS, and combining all that data together to give the robot its position inside of the coffee shop. The code for that is in ROS1. Anyway, so I, did my usual thing, make me a plan, let's go. And like, yeah, cool, that looks good. And, but I managed to get in a kind of once again, a bit of a compiler, things not compiling, not really sure. And I had to just roll back and like, okay, fine. Instead of, using the plan and, hey, you execute this plan, I'm going to give you a plan. And the plan's going to be very simple. It's going to be build a, get the basic package working, check, make sure it compiles. Good, test it. Okay, now add some of the functionality from the ROS1, compile, make sure it works, test it, check. Now add the rest of the functionality from the mapping system, compile, check, make sure it works. And that really basic methodological thing is ultimately where I got to. And I still pair coding with the AI, but man, and I just keep getting angry at myself because I know I should be doing these things, and I always just like go, so it's the new discipline, right? Like that you have to have. We used to have, obviously testing has always been important and breaking things down has always been important, but with these AIs that are so keen to just do it all, and you see their plan, and you're like, yeah, no, that makes sense. Let's go, and then it all falls in a heap, and you spend 2 hours of very limited time to do this project on site, and you end up with having to restart it. It was very painful. But the other thing as well that I did at the same time was just also a bit of fun vibe coding, though, was I was also trying to get Replit to build me a UI for my robot, because ultimately they're going to use a web interface to control it. And so then I did have that weird feeling, even though I had not that great success with the vibe coding in general, I had that weird feeling of having multiple AIs working for me on separate tasks while I was trying to coordinate. And it did feel a little bit like the future in that regard. Yes, Replit, go and do this, add some features over here. Now VS Code with my Copilot, go and do these things. I guess, yeah, other random things I found is I also switched large language models. So I was using Claude 3.7 with my failed version, and then I switched over to Gemini, whatever their latest one is that's available in VS Code. Yeah, and that was really good. But the one thing that was very odd about it was, unlike Claude, because I was running in agent mode, with Claude in agent mode, it would just go nuts. Gemini was actually very polite and would not do anything without me saying, yes, it's okay, which, given I'd had such a bad experience with Claude, like, I was quite grateful for, but I was also kind of weirded out by it because I'd literally set it on agent mode. So I was okay for it to do some stuff. I just wanted to do things slowly.
I find that they don't always behave the same. They seem to get in moods, because I get sometimes where they're actually YOLO vibe their way through a bunch of stuff, and then the next day you're using working on the same project with the same AI, and today it just seems to want me to say yes to everything, and I keep saying, and I get it tends to get into these rhythms too. What was I have the other day? It was like, da 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 da. Would you like me to patch that for you? So they'd write and show me all the code, and then say, if I want to implement it, and say, do you want me to patch this? Just say patch this. And so I kept using that terminology, and I went, I didn't have that yesterday.
Yeah. And it's weird, like, what is...
Got a cool one for you that I've found a trick. I've been playing around with interfaces, because the problem with Replit and all of them is that they have a tendency to come up with fairly vanilla, consistent interfaces.
Yeah.
I found a trick. I've traditionally built stuff in Webflow for years and years and years and years, which is quite a cool interface design Pro system, and it
Yeah.
also sucks in shit from Figma pretty easily. But they've actually got an okay version that you can even use an AI within Webflow now, and you can fully export the code. So I did a bit of a play because I love to play.
Yeah.
Went in and did an AI the interface, the site in Webflow, and then I exported the site, dropped it into Windsurf, which is and then dropped it in and then did it in Windsurf. That's a slightly different story because I'm decided I'm doing a month of windsurfing instead of Cursor.
Try kite surfing next.
Yeah. So, and that worked really well, man. It was really good because one of the things it builds is a very extensive style guide. So the first thing I did is when I brought it into there is I actually used Cursor. That's not Cursor. I used Claude to review the code and tell me about the code. I then have it review the style guides and say, okay, based on the style guides, what isn't there? And it actually then identified would be better in the style guides have some more code snippets and that sort of stuff. So I had it create basically a significant style guide with all of the themes and styles and components and buttons and primaries and secondaries and variables. So it was really extensive. And the advantage I had with that is that I then just would tag when I have to do anything, I'd say I need a new button, and I could tag the style guide, and I actually had the style guide as a page, so I could actually say, use button style primary or secondary or third and those sorts of things. Nice. And to keep the consistency in place and still do stuff which was different with animated, bits and pieces and all of the Webflow animation, which I had put in to begin with. I could keep that in play.
So cool.
So I'm going to probably deep dive in that a little bit further because I'm just trying to how quickly I can run through that process because it's super easy to build a decent sort of 5-page website, but they are relatively generic, and then you have to fight your way through with them to try and get them to look a bit different. And you don't, you're wasting time on that one. Mate, probably for me, I just mentioned I've actually turned off Cursor. Cursor contacted me and asked me why I'd cancelled my account.
And what did they say? What did you say?
Basically said, look, I love the product, but I've just got so many, and this is so many different ones I'm paying for. I'm actually not getting I'm not getting the time to spend in all of them. I figured what I'll do is I'll just take, I'll turn a few off and on and try and whittle it back because there's no way you can afford to do all of them. And particularly now I'm getting frustrated with these $200, $300 plus subscriptions for ultimates in some of these areas. Oh, you want to do this? Oh, but you have to be on ultimate. That's $249 US a month. And I'm going, ooh, geez, this is, as much as they're saying that next year, and they've reiterated it again this week, that next year will be the year that there'll be a first company that's one person and it's it'll sell or be valued at over $1 billion. It'd be nice if it was me, but anyway.
I think it's going to be you, Kev. I believe in
you. Some of these things now to get some of the real grunt out of this stuff is starting to become, on one level, expensive to be a plaything. You do now starting to make decisions. Do I spend $500 a month for this AI as opposed to using subcontractors, or I'm finding myself starting to look at, do I actually have to justify this against headcount? Or if it's $30 here and $30 there, $30 there, it's basically petty cash. Experimental, you can write it off to research. It doesn't have to have a short-term ROI. When you start to spend thousands of dollars a month on this stuff, you then start to have to put it into a real cost line.
Yeah. 100%.
I've got one more thing I really want to chat about, but that's it.
Let's hear it. Let's do it.
Not available here in Australia yet, but launched yesterday. I forget which day of the week it is. Earlier, last couple of days, Google has launched in the US the beginnings of their changes to Google search. Google search as we know it is in its death throes. They are becoming much more of a perplexity, so they are going head forward into answers and keeping people in their system. They're now, I mean, some of the terms that have been used in the SEO market and PPC, that space, that ad spend space is significantly troubling for a lot of people. This is not just when they change the algorithm stuff. This is changing the whole business paradigm. Is coming. Well, it's in a lot of cases it's come. So this no-click results. People are going to Google and effectively getting answers, and it's looking at the moment we'll only have like 3 out ads on the right hand side type stuff to go through the stuff, and the expectation is you'll ask one question. So you might say, what runners should I want? What runners, I'm interested in some good quality running shoes, and it'll give you some, and then it'll say, oh, can you tell me more about the Nike blah blah blah? Then it'll cover off of that, and it'll be recommending, and you'll go through that process and then end up at some place to purchase. Either go through a purchasing thing. Invariably what will happen is that we'll end up with some sort of Apple model where Google's taking a clip of the ticket. I think that's not happening yet, but I imagine what will happen is that you buy the Nike shoes, and guess what? Google's brought the sale to your cash register, and they're going to take a percentage of the $150 you spent on your shoes. So it means a really, really big problem for initially businesses who are looking to attract people into their pipeline. So there'll be no exposure, no data to that middle area while I'm in the decision-making cycle. Yes, you'll have something at the supply side, so they'll come in and buy stuff from websites, etc. at this stage, but that's a major trend. And it's at a time where PPC is in a lot of trouble as well. PPC volume numbers in click-throughs from PPC have dropped to the lowest levels ever, to the worst of the pandemic. And at the same time, the cost for PPC is the highest ever. So you're paying more for your clicks for less clicks. So, and SEO is already tracking with some down rates. So what comes from that, and what does that mean for medium-sized middle businesses and how it fits into that environment, and whether that middle data information is something else that we're going to have to pay for as a product from Google, or Perplexity, or ChatGPT search. All of those environments are going to compete for some of that sort of consumer journeys now. So that's a major, major change for a lot of us. Do I have solutions? There are some, absolutely. There's also the other major trend that's starting to happen in terms of numbers is crap content is going to be downgraded. It's not going to be referenced. So if you think you can fight the story with doubling down yourself with AI to write shitloads of content and shove it out the door, and that's going to compensate for it, you're not going to end up being the ones that they reference. That if they're talking about, here is my answer and here are the reference points for where that data came, built from, you're not going to be one of those. So you're not going to get those click-throughs as part of the verification process. So that's not a strategy. So it is still what I believe quality content is going to win the day. And using AI to create quality content, I think is going to be super important. But if you're not actually acting as really good quality editors, really good quality as into what should be written about, not providing unique and informed insights along with that, I think you're stuffed. I don't know what it is. I don't. These, I think I want to raise it primarily because it's one of these canary in the coal mine shit. I think these are the sorts of things which we're going to start to see fundamental shifts in the way business works first, and I think it's a harbinger of just more stuff to come. More
It's
stuff.
gonna be, yeah. I mean, I'm trying to formulate an opinion on this because I don't know. Like, I mean, it is like on one hand, yeah, it's annoying, but it is helpful. Like, I have to admit, I've seen the Google giving me like a summary of the answer to my question, and it's usually pretty good. And I'm like, thanks, Google, that's great. I don't need to click on the link, right? And I'm usually pretty happy with that outcome. So, like, from a user perspective, it's going to happen. And then from a business perspective, like even if you're the reference to my query, I mean, I guess I sometimes do click on the reference if I'm like it's a bit distrustful, but if it's good enough, it might be good enough, right? So
Well,
even that top reference won't get all the traffic. You know, they'll get a proportion of the traffic.
well, I mean, we already see the first 1 or 2 pages always got the traffic anyway. If you're on page 3 in a Google search, you've got F all. But
yeah,
if you use Perplexity, I don't tend to use Google search much at all anymore. I tend to be a Perplexity first because I want it answered. Is there an MCP for blah?
yeah,
and it gives me good answers, and it's got great and give me great references. So it's become my absolute go-to. No advertising in there at all yet.
yeah.
I'm sure that will potentially change. But yeah, no, it's and if you see the new layout, you can see it. If you look on YouTube, a number of them have got recordings of what Google's looks like in the States because it's changed.
Yeah.
And it will further change over the coming weeks. So yes, from a consumer point of view, the problem you've got is, and this is the catch-22, they're getting that data and those answers from web pages. If people go, well, why would I bother doing web pages? That could become problematic. I think you'll find it's the intermediaries that are going to be the main ones. I've got a website that talks about home builders generally and talks about good ones and bad ones and policies, etc. Those guys are writing content in the middle. They're the ones that are going to have trouble. The guy who's the builder, who actually is the local contractor or whatever, they're still going to get traffic because ultimately that's where the transaction happens.
Has to go to them.
Yeah. It's interesting though.
Yeah.
If I saw some stuff where they were doing listings, and when they talked about this was written, here was some stuff about this guy who writes about SEO. So I was actually looking at a result, and when he clicked on his own link as being the reference link and wanted, who's this guy? Who's writing this? It takes him to his Google profile, not to his homepage, not to his webpage. So
yeah.
there's this, you can see this stuff. Oh, well, we can now get, and now it's becomes, so the references and the reviews and what comes up on your Google business thing becomes even more important. So further keeping you locked in that ecosystem.
Yeah. But I think that we have these competing ecosystems too, right? Like you have LinkedIn and Twitter and everybody, and it might also just mean that we just want to have more personalized connections. And so you might take people may have previously put the effort into like writing on their blog post or whatever. And now they're going to, write on a social platform just to at least know that someone's going to look at their stuff. Because
there's no Google YouTube building communities around wherever that is. Having web. I mean, I've also seen a plethora of people moving off even some of the other platforms like School, which is that sort of community, which is a monetization for a lot of content developers, and because it's so low cost to build your own sites and make quite sophisticated applications, they're actually saying, I'll just build my own and taking their membership, because they're the ones that are attracting those members into School. They're going, well, why am I sharing this with School if all it, because their platform's fairly simplistic. So I can tweak it and make it look, and everyone, instead of me looking exactly like everyone else on School and having the features that everyone else on School's got, I can build my own. So, I mean, I think when you're looking at building those niche communities, I think that's certainly going to um, be an alternative. So, I'm not suggesting that Google's just one and we should give up and take a bat and ball and go home. I think we're just at a phase where we're starting to see some fundamental building blocks.
Things are moving around.
Change. And historically, when you had a company who was the incumbent, because Google makes, I don't know, 80% of their, I'm just making the number up, but it's a huge percentage of their income comes from search advertising.
Yeah.
And therefore, it's them somewhat taking a plunge of eating their old business is shows some.
It's the
and if Google's making those decisions, they're not doing it they're doing it from an informed position, man. Informed.
100%.
They know
because it's their Kodak moment, right? Like if they don't,
no
if
question,
they don't
it's
do
it,
100%.
So
it's definitely Kodak.
Yeah, but the difference is that they're not Kodak. Obviously, hell of a lot.
Yeah.
Those guys. So,
although to be honest, like they were kind of following the trajectory, right? Like invented a whole bunch of cool stuff in house, sat on that stuff, and didn't let it disrupt their business model. And it's only now that there are incumbents who are clearly like, you use Anthropic now instead of Google, right? Who are clearly directly, going against their competing against their core business. That now they're rolling out this tech that they've had for a while.
Yeah, look, that's true, but I think that's probably from a business perspective, that's the smart thing to do. Hey, okay, we're ahead. We can move quickly. We're not going to be caught out. We're a big enough world, far enough. We've invested in DeepMind and all of those things, for a number of, a decade or more. So we're not going to be caught with our pants down where that's our only option. We do have bullets in the gun, opportunities to go. So
it's true. Them acting now is definitely better. Like if they wait probably another couple of years, it might be too late for search. But
well, ChatGPT, as an example, pushed forward and started putting ads and direct sales quicker. And they, then Google didn't react for 12 months or something. And suddenly everyone's going, well, OpenAI buys Perplexity as an example. and combines a Perplexity type view, even if it's sort of one of the ways that they're touching the market. Then it would be interesting. And they partner in with Apple's ad, double click or one of those guys, and it's got the ad sales channels, etc. It would be interesting, but they're obviously not. I still don't know where Google sees. It's not obvious where they see the revenue replacement, because at the moment they look like they're prepared to take a hit on revenue to keep eyeballs.
It's pretty bold.
Look, the point I'm trying to make is whether Google's not, they obviously know a shitload more about what they're doing and I'm doing than we ever will. But I think I'm probably wanting to tell our listeners out there more about these things are changing. And, as much as there's so much hype, which is so much bullshit about so much of this stuff, it's like a lot of things. People predicted flying cars, which haven't or only just starting to arrive now. I think you can order one now, by the way.
Flying car.
but no one saw how much mobile phones or computers in your pocket were going to happen. So I think there's a similar situation here, is that what we think might happen and the changes that might happen in 12 months may not. But I think probably more importantly, 50 things that we haven't even thought about are going to happen. And it's still a seminal moment of change. So I'd encourage the listeners, the few that we have, to be listening and watching shows like ours and others and just paying attention, because I don't care if you're a brickie or plumber or an architect or a banker. This stuff is going to be part of it. You and your AI are going to have a relationship, and it's a bit like dating and being married and that stuff. It's going to be part of your future, whether you like it or not. and how well you are at in the dating market is going to determine a lot of your happiness over the next 15 years. So don't be shy. Get out and
get out there. Meet some AIs.
Learn how to
All right.
buy them a drink.
I think that's a good place to end, I reckon.
No problems. I'll wrap it up, and I'll either post this later tonight or in the morning, depending on how much energy I've got after this conversation.
It's been a good one. It's been a good one. Thank you, Kevin.
Thanks, man.
All right. See you later.
Yeah, where am I? Lost my camera. Yeah.
Hey.